the moment you found this reading today was not the moment you were looking for it, I want to start there because that specific detail matters more than it might appear to matter. On the surface of the finding, before the significance of the timing has been understood in the full and specific form of what it means that this reading found you at a moment you were not specifically looking for the reassurance or the confirmation or the message about this specific person and this specific situation that this reading is delivering. Readings that find you carry more weight than readings you go looking for. That is the specific and important thing to understand about the timing of this finding before the content of the reading has been delivered in the full and arriving form of what it came to say to the specific person it found today at the moment it found them, which was not the moment. They were looking, something in you recognized it anyway, in the specific and preconscious form of a recognition that happens before the conscious attention has had a chance to evaluate whether the recognizing is warranted by the available evidence of what is being recognized. And something in you stopped and clicked and is now here. That something was your intuition, knowing before the knowing was conscious that this message was for you and for the specific person it is about and for the specific situation between you and that person that is about to produce something neither of you has yet named or declared or brought into the visible and settled form of what it is very soon going to be. Welcome, my beautiful soul, and let yourself receive this fully. Before what is coming and how soon and what the very soon actually means in the specific and arriving form of the relationship that is approaching between you and this specific person, I need to acknowledge something that I feel sitting in your energy right now. Underneath everything else, I feel the specific form of hope that has been through enough to have become quieter than it started, in the particular and recognizable form of an original hope that has been reduced in volume by the specific and personal experience of hoping at full volume and not receiving in the full and confirming form that the full volume hoping was hoping for more than once. In the period that preceded this moment, the hope is still there. I want to say that first and clearly, because the quieter form that it has taken after the full volume periods and the not receiving that followed them can feel from the inside like the hope is gone or nearly gone. In the dimmed and barely present form of something that has been turned down rather than turned off. It is turned down, not off, and the difference matters. In the specific and significant form of something that is still present and still capable of returning to the full volume when the receiving arrives, in the confirming and full form of what the full volume hoping was hoping for before the not receiving turned it down into the quieter and more protected form that it has been in since the turning down happened. I also feel something else that I want to name, because naming it precisely is what produces the recognition that this reading was specifically meant for you, rather than the general and approximate form of a reading that could apply to anyone. I feel the specific and quiet form of someone who has been telling themselves in the private and interior form of the honest conversation that the truly honest have with themselves in the quiet moments of the day, that maybe this particular person is not going to arrive in the relationship form that the hoping they would arrive in before the hoping was turned down into the quieter and more protected form that has been making more room for the maybe not than for the full volume hoping that has been harder to sustain in the unconfirmed period that preceded this reading finding you. At the moment you were not looking, the maybe not has been getting louder as the hoping has been getting quieter in the specific and proportional way of the two competing voices in the interior of someone who is in the unconfirmed period of a situation that has not yet declared itself as one thing or the other. For the person living inside it and waiting in the quieter hoping and louder maybe not form of someone whose balance between the two has been shifting in the direction of the maybe not as the unconfirmed period has continued without the confirming. Spirit wants me to say something now that I am going to say directly, without qualification or softening, because it needs the direct form to be fully received by the person it is for, who has been in the quieter hoping and the louder maybe not for long enough to need the direct form rather than the gently suggesting form that leaves room for the maybe not to remain the louder voice. The maybe not is wrong. In the specific and energy-based form of someone who is reading the actual field around this specific situation right now, and finding in it something that contradicts what the maybe not has been saying in the louder and increasingly dominant form that it has been taking as the unconfirmed period has continued without the confirming that would have silenced the maybe not before it became as loud as it has become in the interior of the person reading this. The maybe not is wrong, and what is actually in the field around this specific situation is the specific and arriving form of something that is moving toward the relationship that the full volume hoping was hoping for, and that the quieter hoping has been maintaining in the diminished but still present form through the period of the maybe not that is now about to be answered in the definitely yes form of the very soon that the title is naming as the time frame for what is arriving. Now, I want to describe what is happening. On the other side of this situation, in the interior of this specific person, right now, because the interior of the other person is the most directly relevant thing for understanding why the very soon is as soon as it is, rather than the later that the unconfirmed period might suggest. It should still be if the field around the situation were not producing what it is producing right now. On the other side, this person has been deliberating in the specific and interior form of someone who knows what they want, but who has been weighing the specific costs and risks of moving from the knowing what they want into the declaring what they want in the full invisible form of someone who names the wanting in the relationship declaring way. That the very soon is pointing toward as the arriving form of the declaration that the deliberating has been building toward. They tried approaching slowly first in the taking their time form of someone who believed that the slower the approach, the more certain the footing before the declaration was made in the full and exposed form that declarations take when they have finally been made after the deliberating that preceded them. In the slower approach, that was supposed to produce the certainty that the footing was solid before the declaration committed to it, but that produced uncertainty instead. In the specific and frustrating form of a slower approach that generated more to deliberate about rather than less. As the deliberating continued in the slower and slower form that the careful approach produced, they tried creating conditions next in the waiting for the right circumstances form of someone who set specific conditions that the declaring would require to be met before the declaring was safe to make in the full and committed form that the wanting deserved, but that the conditions were delaying by remaining the conditions for the declaring rather than being met in the specific form. That would release the declaring from the condition waiting into the declared and visible form that the wanting was ready for, but that the conditions were not yet. Releasing from the condition holding that the creating conditions strategy produced, and they tried waiting for a sign in the specific and understandable form of someone who wanted, before the declaring happened, some clear and unmistakable indication from the person they were deliberating about declaring to that the declaring would be received in the welcoming and wanting it back form that would make the declaring something other than the risk that it is. For someone who wants to know before the declaring that the declaring is going to land well in the form it is making before the making commits to the full and exposed form of having declared what was wanted in the relationship form that the very soon is arriving as slow approach, creating conditions, waiting for a sign. None of them produced the declaring, and the deliberating has now arrived at the specific and decisive form of someone who has run out, of the strategies for delaying, and who is therefore arriving at the declaring in the full and very soon and relationship form that the deliberating has been building toward. For the full period of the slow approach and the condition creating and the sign waiting that have all been tried and found insufficient as substitutes for the declaring that is now arriving. Spirit is showing me the timing, and I want to name it in the specific and grounded form that is most useful to the person who has been in the quieter hoping and needs to know when to let the hope return to the full volume it was turned down from before the unconfirmed period turned it down in the protective form of someone who was managing against the cost of the full volume, receiving another not confirming within the next 30 days. The declaring happens in the specific and relationship form of what the deliberating was always building toward, when the alternatives to the declaring had been exhausted. In the slow approach and the condition creating and the sign waiting that have all now been tried and found insufficient. 30 days for the declaring that ends the unconfirmed period and begins the relationship that the full volume hoping was hoping for, and that the quieter hoping has been maintaining in the protected and turned down form that this reading is about to return to the full volume it deserves before the 30 days have passed. Now I need to speak to a voice that I feel clearly in your energy, and that I want to address before it receives the 30 days and the maybe not is wrong in the reactive and undermining form that it takes when it has not been addressed first. The voice says 30 days has been the time frame before in other readings or other situations or other versions of the very soon that did not ultimately produce the declaring in the relationship form in the 30 days that were named as the time frame for the declaring. Before the 30 days pass, without the declaring and the quieter hoping was produced by the not declaring that the 30 days delivered instead of the declaring that the 30 days was supposed to contain. Oof, that voice is not wrong about the history it is referencing, and the history it is referencing is real and proportionate, and the source of the quieter hoping that this reading is meeting in the honest and direct form rather than the dismissive form that would tell the voice simply to trust this time without the specific reasoning that distinguishes this time from the times the voice is referencing as the basis for its wariness. The difference is this: the alternatives have been exhausted in the specific and completed form of someone who has tried every strategy for delaying the declaring and found all of them insufficient as substitutes for the declaring itself, which is what makes this 30 days different from the previous time frames that the voice is referencing as the basis for its wariness. Those previous time frames were time frames during which the alternatives were still available to the person deliberating and who therefore had the option of continuing the deliberating into the next period without the declaring, because the alternatives were still more comfortable than the declaring and therefore still being tried. This period is different because the alternatives are gone and the only remaining movement is the declaring in the full and relationship form that the 30 days is pointing toward as the specific container for the declaring that has nowhere else to go. Now that the alternatives have been exhausted, I want to give you something before I close in the permission form that the quieter, hoping person reading this specifically needs before the 30 days and the declaring they contain. Permission to let the hope return to full volume. Now, before the 30 days have produced the declaring, that will confirm the full volume as warranted, rather than waiting for the confirming before allowing the return to the full volume that the confirming will justify in the retroactive form of allowing the full volume. After the evidence has arrived, rather than the chosen form of allowing it now, before the evidence, because this reading is the evidence. Let the hope return to the volume it deserves for the specific situation this reading has described and the specific person whose alternatives have been exhausted and whose declaring is arriving in the 30-day form of what the full volume hoping was always hoping for. When it was at the full volume, that the unconfirmed period turned down into the quieter form, that this reading is turning back up now before the 30 days and the declaring and the relationship that is arriving very soon for the specific person whose intuition stopped and clicked and brought them here. At the moment, they were not looking for exactly this. Let it return, my beautiful soul. The full volume was always the right volume for this